Fear is normally, or most common, the first emotion that pops up with a new diagnosis, a relapse, or a life-changing event. And looking back over the past 23 years, I realized that a majority of that time, I let fear control me more than the MS did. Fear felt like a bigger part of the journey, but I realized it wasn't. And let's talk about why. For me, on diagnosis day, as soon as I heard the words, "you have multiple sclerosis," it was a barrage of what ifs. What if I can't work? What if I can't walk? What if I can't have sex? What if I have to wear a Depends? What if this changes everything? I just signed papers for a truck and was just graduated with the CDL. I was transitioning from being a dispatcher to an owner-operator, and that was in my mind. I was numb from my toes up to my chest. I wasn't handling that well, and especially with all of my thoughts. And I'm an overthinker, anyways. I don't know. I grew up with ADHD, and so my mind is constantly going, and that was not helpful in those terms. But responses to fear, responding to fear, I guess you could say. Everybody does that differently. Some go directly into research, some directly go into activity like exercise, dieting, helping others even. Some people dive into faith, immediately run to a church. Some people have the power to have acceptance right out the gate. Those are far and few between. Those are really strong people that instead of thinking what's life going to be like in today, they're thinking immediately like, what can I do today, rather than thinking about the what ifs. That was not me. I was not that way. I responded with fear, with immediately diving into research, and not about the disease itself. I dove more into how to beat it, and which then did lead me to the fad diets of eating these, finding these books even that were promising all of these different disease cures. If you do this, follow this, and this root and this, plant, and mixing it with this. I did all of that. And I also did, I was already in the drummer of a praise band and the lead singer of a Christian rock band. And immediately went to my church and contacted everybody else that went to church and was put on prayer list. I was anointed with oil, and almost too confident that this was it. This was done. This disease does not have me. And that's how I responded to those things. And again, everybody's different. And fear is not a bad thing. Again, fear is like the alarm clock. If the house is on fire, fear is what tells you to get out. Fear is not always the enemy. Fear got me moving. Fear got me doing the research. I gained knowledge. Knowledge is power, they say. Through all of these different fad diets, I was able to eventually find something healthy, long time after. But it's when fear becomes the problem, when the what ifs don't stop, and you don't stop them, and you give fear control. Picture this. Let me put it this way. When for me anyways, when I had let fear drive. Picture you hail a cab, and when the cab pulls up and you look in and you see the cabbie, and he's gripping the steering wheel, and he's looking around, he's all paranoid, and he's mumbling, and Would you get in that cab? I did. I was the driver. So yeah, I did not respond well. And then what would happen is when those things didn't work, it caused me to even spiral worse. When, when God didn't heal me and the next relapse happened, I walked away from the ministry. I was almost had a bitterness towards God. When the diets didn't work, I decided I'm going to eat and do whatever I want, and I ballooned. When obviously I lost my CDL. That's, you're not going to be a driver with the conditions with my legs. And, so I went back into dispatch. I just held on to a lot of the bitterness because I didn't know how to adapt. I didn't know how to do, I was still trying to hold on to my old life. And I did that for 2 decades. And it wasn't until I had a bad relapse in 2020 that I finally I guess I just woke up to the point that I started off with one disability, I guess you'd say. I had a physical limitation. I added the mental limitation, the emotional limitation, the spiritual limitation. I turned one thing into 4, and that's on me. I have no one to blame for those things, but because I wasn't the strongest mind as I should have been. See, after that major relapse, it was, how do I say it? I was fighting something that was blind and deaf. It couldn't hear me yell. It couldn't hear me complain. It couldn't see me cry. It couldn't see the anger on my face. And once I realized that I'm fighting against something that doesn't really care, that I'm fighting against it, that changed my mindset. And it was a light bulb. It was like, I need to fight for my life with MS, not fight my life and fight MS, because I've lost several friends that had MS that went down a worse path than me. One drowned himself in alcohol. It was time to wake up. And so instead of being the person dragging that anger and that fear and that doubt behind me, I started to push fear aside, and I reconnected with God, and I'm in a much better emotional place now. I've reached out to others. I now want to help others. I learned how to adapt, and I started from every little thing, from morning to night. If I was struggling with something, I sat down and was like, I need to figure out a different way to do this so that I can continue and be an inspiration. And I think that everybody out there that's going through something, you can do this too. Fear can ride with you. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's a catalyst. It just can't determine the destination. So take that to heart, and if you are struggling physically, remember, don't stop doing, just do it differently. God bless.